America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone. Hi, and welcome to Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation.
And I'm Alfredo Ortiz, CEO of Job Creators Network.
And you can subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcast from. Today, we are excited to be joined by Georgia State Senator John Albers. Senator Albers has long been an active member of his community. His affiliations include numerous boards of directors for business, civic, and charitable organizations. He's a fourth-generation firefighter that served for over 30 years as a volunteer, and his sons continue the family legacy as fifth-generation first responders. Professionally, John is a business owner and executive with nearly 3 decades of management and consulting experience. Senator Albers, welcome to Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone.
Well, thank you, Elaine and Alfredo. It's great to be here, and I'm a big fan of Job Creators Network and all the wonderful work you're doing across our nation.
Excellent.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that.
Well, before we get into politics and things you're doing in the Georgia legislature, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you actually decided to step into politics.
Well, thank you, Elaine. It's such an honor to serve other people. And ever since I was a young man, I always felt called to help serve other people. And that was as a firefighter and EMT. It was in my business life, and it continued, through the organizations I participated in, and from my church to coaching youth sports and being involved in the Rotary Club and so many other great organizations. And I felt that God always nudged me to serve in this capacity. In fact, I was commenting a little earlier, it was 15 years ago tomorrow that I decided to run for office. And it's been really a great journey. And I'm supported by my lovely wife, Carrie, of 31 years. We've got 2 adult sons now, aged 28 and 21. In fact, my younger one just getting ready to graduate from college in a couple weeks. So we're really blessed. And I believe to whom much is given, much is required of us to do good in this world.
That's a great story.
Well, Senator, part of your story, there's a part of that, your personal journey that involves you and your son. And I know it's very, very personal for you. And I appreciate you actually opening up and actually having an opportunity to chat about it. But I'm going to let you talk about it because I tell you, every time I hear about it, it brings a tear to my eye. But it's an amazing story, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Alfredo. My older son, Will, back a few years ago, was starting to get sick. He was getting very run down. He was not able to hold food down. And, the problem is at the time, 24-year-old young people don't go to the doctor, even when their moms and dads ask them to. That culminated him into actually getting sick to his stomach, vomiting blood. And in August of 2020, we were in the doctor's office and then to Cherokee Northside Hospital and then all the way to the ICU unit. And this was the middle of COVID. It was very challenging to get care and get access. Thankfully, I was able to be in his room with him. But the most horrifying thing that ever could happen to a father, aside from seeing that many tubes coming out of your child, is when the doctor kind of motioned me out to the hallway. And he said, "John, we don't know exactly what's going on, but all his organs are shutting down, and we don't know if he's going to make it through the night." I was just devastated and helpless. All I could do was go back in and hold my son's hand and pray for him. And I knew what the doctor was telling me. I've been a first responder for 30 years. He was telling me to prepare myself that likely my son was not going to survive. But thank God, about 4 or 5 hours later, they realized his kidneys had completely shut down and shriveled up and were no longer able to perform. And they told me at that time they had to do an emergency procedure to put my son on dialysis, which is something you'd think of as an 80-year-old, not a 24-year-old. And while that was very difficult news for us to hear. It was our only option. And they did that emergency procedure and put a catheter in. And thank God he was alive. We spent 11 days in ICU and eventually got him home. But it forever changed, obviously, his life and ours. My wife and I are super type A personalities, right? We are go make it happen. We're well educated. We are pretty well connected. And we thought, well, we can do this, right? We went into fix it mode because that's what moms and dads do. We do anything for our children. But it's a tough process. It's a really difficult process to get through. And along the way, many trips to the hospital. He was having to go to a dialysis clinic 3 days a week. Eventually, we could do that at home. But just the impacts to our life were extraordinary. And why that happened, I got canceled and lost a job over politics. We had a lot of other family things going on. It really was just a tough time in life. But you know what? God never gives us more than we can handle. And I will tell you, he sent angels along the way. And on July 1st of 2021, I got the greatest phone call of my life. When the doctor said, John, you're not just a match. You're a darn near perfect match to give your son a kidney. And what was supposed to be 3 months later got moved up to 3 weeks. And on July 21st, 2021, we walked in arm to Emory Hospital. And I was able to give him lefty, as we say, my left kidney. And I'm proud to report it'll be 3 years here in July. Will is healthy, happy, doing wonderful. And this is part of our life calling now. This could have happened to anybody. It happened to us, and I believe there's a reason for that. So I was able to author and pass the Giving the Gift of Life Act in Georgia. We have passed similar legislation in 26 states now. We're working on the federal level to pass several different pieces of legislation that helps protect living donors, helps protect those who are on the donor list. And my goal is to flip the list. There's 115,000 people waiting for an organ on any given day. And I want to eliminate that list so it's the other way around. There are people waiting to help at any given time. Wow.
That is, I tell you, every time I hear that story, John, it's just an amazing story. It warms the heart. And all I can think is God is good.
All the time.
Yeah. So it's an amazing story, like I said. And so we thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to switch gears on you a little bit now, back to your political hat here. Recently, during the 2020 election, the Georgia legislature passed the Election Integrity Act. And as you know, the legislative body from the governor on down was accused of a lot of different things, right? And we heard a lot of different slurs being thrown at you guys and accused of a lot of different things. But can you actually talk to us a little bit about that and what the reality of that really became?
Absolutely. You know, in Georgia, it's easy to vote and it's hard to cheat. And that's been proved since we passed two major election integrity bills, one actually back in 2021 and another one just this current legislative year. And when we passed the first one, there were those on the other side of the aisle that were kind of doing a Chicken Little type scenario. The sky was going to fall. This was the worst thing ever. But the reality is we put smart, practical things in place. Got great advice from groups like Job Creators Network and the Heritage Foundation and other groups. And when we were done passing that bill in 2021, we were actually named number one for election integrity. And the very next large election in 2022, we had record turnout in Georgia. More people voted than ever in history, both from a sheer number and a percentage. So again, it gets back to easier to vote and hard to cheat. We had to put controls in place. Everybody wants a safe and secure election. We want to make sure the people that are voting are only those people who are allowed to vote. And there are some concerns about things such as QR codes on a ballot. Well, you know, technology's been around for about 30 years right now that can read text right off of something. And that's the way we used to do our voting machines. So we made some very good, meaningful updates. We want to make sure there's good audit capabilities, but ultimately we want people to have the confidence in their election system. And I am very confident that we have done the work of the people, and everyone can go into the polls in Georgia and know that their vote is going to be counted and counted properly.
Yeah, that's great. So for the 24 election coming up here in November, what do you say to the folks that or here in the state, of course, and across the country?
Well, I tell them that they should model what Georgia does because, again, we're named #1 for election integrity. We make sure that people have an ID when they go vote, whether they do that by mail or in person, just like all of us have to do when we have to go get on an airplane. You want to go to the store and buy something that someone has to be over 21. These are pretty straightforward matters, but they put reasonable and smart parameters in place. And of course, we want to always clean up the voter list. If someone doesn't live in their district or live in our state, well, they can't vote there anymore. And while we hope that people do that on their own, there are systems in place now for us to make sure that that's done properly.
So you mentioned one thing. Want to talk a little bit about it because it was an important thing in the past election. I think it's going to continue to be more and more important. But that's early voting, mail-in ballots, and the Republican Party historically hasn't been a fan of that and hasn't really pushed that. Really, they like the election day voting. How do you see that changing for the 24 election?
I believe there's going to be a hybrid of the way people come and vote. You know, there are some folks that legitimately need to have a mail-in ballot. Right? They might be traveling for their business. They may be ill. They may have something going on that precludes them from getting there. But we have an enormous early voting opportunity for people, too. And it's good to go vote in person. I have always brought my boys with me to vote. I wanted to see them to see firsthand what civic duty was all about, and that really being the most basic of things we can do. So I believe we'll have a strong turnout. I know it does work out good for a lot of folks to vote early. My wife's favorite thing to do is to vote early. Yet I always like to go on election day because I'm always the first person in line in my precinct. It's part of my tradition, getting the opportunity to talk to the poll workers, thank them for their hard work. But all of that really culminates into making sure people's voices are heard, and it's done a proper way. We limited the use of drop boxes, which were very concerning because they were not monitored at the time. We controlled all those, made sure they're under our surveillance at all times to make sure that, again, they were being used for the right matters. I'll share a very brief story if I can. A few years ago when we passed Senate Bill 202, the voting bill, a woman called me up and she just couldn't believe it. She was devastated because she told me that she had been voting and putting her ballot in a drop box for the last 25 years. And she couldn't understand why we were consolidating and changing that. I said, well, ma'am, drop box didn't exist until 2020. So in some cases, it's a little bit of people informed. The drop box in her case was actually the mailbox.
Oh.
So a lot of this tends to just make sure we're educating people, but we want people to be smart. We want them to look at the facts. I think the facts will be very clear, both in the primary and the general election this year, of where the country has been, where it's going to be, certainly the state of Georgia. We're proud to be the #1 place, not just for business, but to live, work, play, and raise a family.
Now, the new co-chair of the Republican Party on a national base, National Republican Party, Laura Trump, mentioned something that they're going to be pushing for what's called legal ballot harvesting. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because I know there's a lot of confusion about what she was talking about when she mentioned that.
I didn't hear her words specifically, Alfredo, so I'm not exactly sure what she means that.
Okay.
You know, ballot harvesting, it can be a couple different things depending on somebody's interpretation of what that is. In an election cycle, it's not uncommon for us to see who has voted along the way, right? We can't tell you who they voted for, but let's say in my district there's 200,000 or so residents. If I know that half of them had voted early, well, and I'm doing my final push to send out mailers or knock on doors or make phone calls. Well, I don't want to call the people that already voted, right? I want to obviously maximize my time there. So that is part of it, as well as where people go illegally, which is when they're going and they're incenting people to go vote, which is something we shut down in Georgia, where they go to certain areas and say, hey, free gift cards, free food, free drinks, free whatever to come vote. And that's just simply wrong. That, you know, we want people to exercise their duty as an American citizen by doing their homework and making a good vote.
Senator Albers, I pulled the myths versus facts on the Georgia voting bill off the Senate website. Myth number 1, quote, Jim Crow 2.0 is about two insidious things: voter suppression and election subversion. It's no longer about who gets to vote. It's about making it harder to vote. President Joe Biden, January 2022. Here's the facts. Over 850,000 Georgians cast early ballots in the May primary in Georgia, more than 3 times the number in 2018 and higher than in 2020, a presidential year. I would call that successful. But you had President Biden, Stacey Abrams, high-profile Hollywood people, major Georgia corporations, and even Major League Baseball spreading misinformation, and we'll call them untruths, about this bill. And of course, we saw what a total success it was, and your fact sheet bears that out. I was wondering if any of your colleagues or yourself have received any apology phone calls from any of those folks.
Well, it was so sad and irresponsible, Elaine, for what they did. And look, Hollywood lives in a fantasy world, sadly, and most of what they do is fake. And I think they tend to translate that into their real lives sometimes. No excuse for their behavior, totally irresponsible. The Georgia corporations also pandering to a tireless liberal socialist minority of their folks, as opposed to doing what's right. If they were to run their company the way that they acted during that, they'd be bankrupt. They would be gone. They would have all lost their jobs. In fact, I think those who made those foolish comments probably should have lost their jobs because, they can't be immune from saying things that they're factually untrue and then bringing harm to our state. But no, we never got a call back from any of those folks, even though I found it quite ironic that some of the things they were complaining about, you actually have to do in order to leverage their businesses, such as a photo ID, such as making sure you're following the rules, et cetera. And then last but certainly not least, Major League Baseball was such an embarrassment. I mean, they couldn't have done things more poorly. And we got poetic justice when the Braves won the World Series anyway, and it came here. But, New York, who's got terrible voting laws that actually is prohibitive, that's where they're based, and that's where they were making those foolish and biased decisions. And last but not least, I'm not sure President Joe Biden even knows what day it is these days. So I'm not sure I could ever rely on what somebody put in front of him and he read that moment, because he doesn't really understand what's happened here. But the people of Georgia do. And in 2022, we sent Stacey Abrams, the liberal darling of the Democratic Party, packing in a landslide victory of almost 8% by Governor Brian Kemp, who again focused on easy to vote and hard to cheat, and also the kitchen table issues that we know that families want. Those good conservative values have been tried and true since the beginning of our nation, and they're even more important today.
Are you all considering any additional measures to strengthen voting laws in Georgia at this point?
I think after this year, Elaine, in the 2024 legislative session, I think we kind of cleaned up a handful of things that we have learned along the way. New technology, new times, new processes, a lot of use of tools that are out there that didn't exist. I think we've applied those pretty well, and we'll watch that because we want to be good stewards of the process. And over the next year or two, if an adjustment needs to be made, we'll certainly do that. But I think we're in really good shape right now.
Great. Excellent. Well, congratulations. That was just an important piece of legislation. And it must have felt good when the midterms came around and you were able to show those kinds of voting numbers. And even if they don't want to apologize, I hope they're very embarrassed.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you.
Well, Senator, again, switching gears to you on education in Georgia. As you know, very excited about this as well. Georgia passed the Georgia Promise Scholarship Act. I think that was SB 233, which failed last year, but this year did win. A modest, I think, showing, and sort of 20,000 students, I think, that can benefit from these education scholarship accounts. But walk us through the process, because quite frankly, a lot of us were so surprised that it failed last year, and that it was close to really failing this year, as we got involved in it to kind of push it a little bit over the line. Hopefully our involvement helped on that front. But can you walk us through, why it was actually so difficult, and then the future of more of these? Are we going to get to universal school choice like other states have?
Well, first, I want to thank you, Alfredo, Elaine, and your entire team. I don't think we would have passed it without your help, as well as other groups who engaged to make sure that we were getting the message across, getting the priority across to all the legislators involved. I want to really thank Senator Greg Dolezal on the Senate side, and then the House of Representatives Speaker Pro Tem Jan Jones. The two of them really helped shepherd that through each chamber. We passed it last year in the Senate, but we ran into a logjam in the House of Representatives. And that was unfortunate. It took an extra year. But what this does is it helps the kids and the parents in those failing schools to have an option where there normally no way of getting out of a bad situation. Now, me personally, I want 100% school choice. It's education freedom. We have education funding and schools for one reason only: to educate children. And nobody should be trapped by their zip code or their address to going to a single school that may or may not fit their specific need. And I believe that we should make sure that the tax dollars collected are used very prudently and used with the parent to make sure we're getting that individual to where they are. So I think we took a great bite at the apple. And I think we have to now continue this momentum in years to come. The challenge that happens sometimes is legislators, we have to have good relationships with our school boards, with our school superintendents, our city elected officials, our county elected officials, our federal counterparts. That's important. That's how you get work done. Well, sometimes those relationships, they feel personal. Like for some reason, if I offer school choice, I'm doing something against my local county school system, or it's personal to the local school superintendent. But that's not the choice at all, right? The choice is about the kids. And what we found is people don't mass leave a public school when you offer school choice. In fact, everybody's boat rises in that tide. The public schools end up performing better because they feel competition. The people that need to and want to have a different option and choice get to move, whether that be to another public school, a charter school, a private school, a Christian school, whatever it happens to be that fits them best. And we have to remember that it's not about the person who lives down the road from me. It's about the children and the parents making good decisions for their kids' future. And we need to evolve our entire education system. We have been teaching the same way for the last 85 years in our country, but the world's changed 10 times over. We have to radically change the way we're doing K through 12 education, and most certainly in our college and universities.
Well, we're really excited, Senator, because as you know, we launched with ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, and Steve Moore, who runs the Committee to Unleash Prosperity, an alliance, the Education Freedom Alliance, where we're going to push for 25 states by the end of 2025 to be universal choice states. And so I know 20,000 is a great start. It's a modest start, but I think we have a few million kids in Georgia, in the education system in Georgia. So I think there's a big opportunity to really get those kids all that education freedom that other states like Iowa, Arizona, and stuff are doing. So, we would love to stay in touch on that one, because anything that we can do on that one, we'd be happy to help. Because, as you know, from my own personal story, education freedom allowed me to basically be here speaking to you, and our friendship to be such as it is, because without that, I would have been probably back where I was. Not that it was, a horrible life, but I think I've made some differences as I've gone through life that I wouldn't have been able to make had I not had that educational freedom. So I do hope that the legislative body sees the importance of this and sells the win, because I will tell you that folks tend to forget selling the win. They take the victory lap and they walk away. And so hopefully you can lead the charge on that selling the win. Well,
I'll tell you, Alfredo, I absolutely will. And this is a great opportunity, just like we did with the voting bill, to show it's exactly opposite of what the naysayers said. Right. We will do here to show that, no, this actually helped the students. It helped the kids. It didn't impact locals. And when you continue to build off of those great wins, and we show the data, that allows us to get to where we need, which is full school choice. And I thank you for partnering with ALEC. I'm the co-chair for Georgia of ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. Yep. They do a phenomenal job, and I've got several pieces of legislation that goes through the process with ALEC to make sure it's model legislation, and I get to use some of my counterparts as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're excited to announce, too, that Governors Ducey, former governor of Arizona, and current governor of Iowa, Kim Reynolds, are actually our co-chairs on this alliance. So we have a lot of firepower, star power now behind this, and we're really excited. So please count on us for anything you might need here in the state of Georgia on this.
Thank you.
Senator Albers, just one follow-up question on the education. We hear political leaders, business leaders, parents say that this is the civil rights issue of our time. I really think COVID changed how we all view education when we actually pulled back the curtain and we saw what our kids were learning online during COVID, and they had to learn from home. And so many children are showing that they're very behind, specifically in a lot of blue states as a result, who were shut down much longer than states like Georgia. Actually, Georgia wasn't shut down very long at all. You opened first in the country. This particular bill I read is limited to the 25% of the bottom failing schools. First, do you know how many students you think that will impact? And do you see an opportunity to push for universal education in the future?
Great questions, Elaine. I'm not sure the total number of students that would be, but it's going to be hundreds and hundreds of thousands. I don't have the exact number handy, but we've got millions of people in schools, right? And sadly, out of those 25% failing, we leave that child and that parent or guardian with no other options. As a government, our job is to create a educated workforce, an educated population that can give back and be a part of society. And we want to give people hands up, not hands out, right? And I think we're going to continue to do that. And the things that people are learning online exposed a lot of things. We were seeing kids being indoctrinated as opposed to educated. And because kids were home during COVID, parents got to see that a little more closely as they were doing a lot of that school online for a short time. But you're right, Georgia went back to school and went back to work right away. Number one in the nation. Because of that, we had the largest surplus in history. We had the lowest unemployment in history. In fact, the millions of people who are leaving California, Illinois, New York, et cetera, where are they moving? Well, they're all moving to the Southeast, right? And they're moving here for the very freedoms that they can't have there. But I have to remind everybody who moves to our fair state, and we welcome them with open arms, don't vote in the problems you just escaped from.
Right.
You moved here for a reason. And if you left those areas, make sure you understand that, because we want to continue to have a prosperous and growing Georgia. And we want them to make sure that they are part of the solution and don't become part of the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Senators, we're coming down to the end of our time here. I want to make sure we have just a couple of minutes to talk about something that I know you're involved with, and it's so important and crucial for our businesses in Georgia. HB 808. I guess that's reducing taxes on tangible personal property. Can you translate that into English, why that's important?
Certainly. And I was so excited with the support from Job Creators Network and the NFIB championing together. So tangible personal property is the craziest of all taxes. So let's say I own a landscaping company. I have bought all of my equipment, mowers and chainsaws and weed whackers and all that stuff. I paid sales tax on it. I hired people. I had to pay all the taxes for having employees. But then at the end of the year, they add up what I have in my inventory, and they tax me again for what's sitting in the garage of my landscape company, or it's sitting in my office if I'm an accountant, or it's sitting in my office if I'm a software developer. It makes no sense at all. We got to raise that up from an inflationary level to 3 times higher than what it was, which is great. A great first bite at the apple. This is going to be a difference maker for people at the end of the year, from making money versus losing money, to be able to hire, to be able to get out there and market their business more. and really to have more of their money that they earned. Our goal in the future will be to get rid of that oppressive tax once and for all. I think we could all agree that we don't need any more taxes. And in Georgia, on top of that, Alfredo, we have continued to lower the income tax. In fact, in my time of service, we've lowered taxes 17 different times in different ways, from property taxes to tax rebates to tax refunds to lowering the income tax, you name it, across the board. And I'm so proud of that. And it's great to see that. Then you see places like California, New York, who are adding all these new taxes and burdening those people. And you can see why here in Georgia, we're doing things right and we're growing and prospering, and why they are continuing to have nonstop problems.
No, that's great. Senator, one more question before we sign off here. Governor Kemp is termed out, I believe, moves on in a couple years. If I'm getting my facts correct,
He is.
Rumor is that he'll be running for U.S. Senate, which obviously means there'll be an open governor's seat. As any good quote unquote reporter does. So any interest in running for governor?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I got to get through this election in November 1st, and then you and I will sit down and have a glass of wine, and we'll talk through that. But Governor Kemp has done a magnificent job. Couldn't be more proud of him. And I hope he will continue to be a leader, whether that be in the U.S. Senate or even higher.
Well, I'll put you down as a maybe then.
All right, fair enough.
Senator Albers, how can people find out more about your agenda for Georgians and Georgia small businesses? What website?
Thank you, Elaine. It's very simple. It's just senatoralbers.com. So the word senator and my last name.com. Would love to hear from you as well. So through that median, please contact us. If we can first off serve you and your family, your business, that's our job number one, constituent services. We want to have a chance to meet with you face to face, as well as any way that we can learn from you. As I tell people, we are a state full of professionals that have great education and background and opportunities. And I, as a state senator, don't know everything at all. But I have to rely on people's wisdom and knowledge, just like I do with you, Elaine, and Alfredo, and other great organizations like Job Creators Network, ALEC, NFIB, et cetera, because getting all that information together makes us a much better public servant.
Great. And that was senatoralbers.com. Nice and easy. Excellent. Well, Senator Albers, thank you very much for taking the time to join us on Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. And thank you all for taking the time to join us and listen. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. Please subscribe to salempodcast.com, salempodcastnetwork.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll be back soon with another episode. Bye for now.